Like it's execution that wins, not theorizing. So if you're out there thinking about some idea and you're not sure, if just start doing it. Like even if it's not your full-time job, you want to go learn about AI agents, go to find some platform online and build an AI agent. Have it try to convince your wife to buy pizza. I don't know. It can be something as simple as that, but you'll learn a ton, right?
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. Alex Levin, I'm so thrilled to have you on the show today. You're the CEO at Regal, agents for data centers, for call centers, inbound and outbound, sales agents, all kinds of things that I think people are just starting to think about, but maybe haven't fully realized the potential of. So I'm excited to have you on to talk about this world. You've been in this before people were even really thinking about generative AI and AI tools and resources. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about your journey. I mean, you went to Harvard, right? You have a psychology degree. You really thought about mind, brain, behavior. Those are neuroscience and psychology are things that I think are really tuned in to how we appropriately use technology as well. So what was the start of your career? And then how did you evolve into, let's create this thing that before people even really know what it is so that we can help with a solution that people really need?
Yeah. So I had worked for a long time in product and in marketing. And then at the last company called Angie, we owned all the big home services companies in the US. So Home Advisor, Angie's List, some things you may know. And I started getting more involved with contact center because a big part of the business was, how do we engage with customers? How do we answer their support? How do we sell them on, new projects? And I was just shocked at how backwards the technology was and spent, years trying to work with our old technology vendors to improve what they were doing and just got tired of complaining. And so eventually put my money where my mouth is and left and started a company to do this. So, we really focus on what can we do to, really step change, improve the experiences customers have with brands. And, a couple of the biggest pain points that come up. One is, customers trying to reach you and they're waiting on hold, for billions of hours a year. And it's just a terrible experience. Two is, a customer's trying to reach you and you don't have your phone number anymore. They've hidden their phone number and forget hold. That's even more annoying, right? Or vice versa. You're coming in, you're submitting some information, you're asking for them to call you back for a quote and they don't reach out to you. Or maybe that they did and you didn't know it was them because it was a random number. So those are the sorts of things where, the legacy systems just were not getting it done. And so we've completely changed the paradigm by using AI agents, where now we have agents who are always available. They know everything about your account, as good as the best trained people inside the company. And it means there's, zero hold time. It means that we can make the phone number available anytime to the customer. It means that the second you ask for something, we can call you back. And it's just completely changing that experience for customers. I think people are, worried, is the AI agent good enough? Well, ours are, not all of them are, but yes, the newest technology is as good, if not better than humans. So that's no longer really the question. The question is like, what can AI agents do that humans can't, right? And there's a lot, right? There's a lot of capabilities that we have because of the power of the technology that humans don't have. And so it gets very exciting very quickly. To give you order of magnitude, I'd say our customers today, our enterprises, and 20 to 30% of their volumes are now handled by AI agents. And I'd say within 5 years, 90% will be handled by AI agents.
Yeah. Well, that was one of my questions is, are you an enterprise solution? Do you work with small to medium-sized businesses? So I think you answered part of that. But I do think, to your point, a lot of people are not using agents in the correct way. I see complaints every single day about when I'll look up a brand and I'll see complaints on Reddit or somewhere else that everything's run by AI. They don't have any customer service. We're not able to get the answers we need about the product. Or if it's, for instance, a pet product, my dog just passed away, I need to cancel. I'm not able to figure out a way to cancel. And the AI's, not letting me allow it.
Again, I would be really careful.
Yeah.
The complaints that are going on now are not about AI. Let's be really clear. The complaints now are about automation.
Okay.
which is
Yes.
very different, right? So customers are coming in and saying, I can't reach this brand. The hold times are long. They've hidden the phone number. They're sending me some chat bot. They're not letting me reach them. The power of AI is that even though it is automation, it empowers you to go back to a very sort of personalized experience, right? Where you can allow the customer to call you anytime, do these pieces anytime. So AI is actually the answer, not the problem. Automation in the
Thank
old
you.
way is the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Great distinction. Thank you for bringing that to the table. What was it like to start your own business after having worked in other businesses? Did you find new barriers? You're creating agents when people are even just learning about generative AI. So people might not even know that this is the next level and this is something that can exist in a truly humanized fashion.
Yeah, both my co-founder and I had worked for other founders in the past and are definitely used to the startup life. But it was, obviously a change to all of a sudden be the founders. It's as people describe, it is a roller coaster. One day highest highs, the next day lowest lows, and you have to get very good at riding those out and making sure that you're still keeping your eye focused on where you want to go. Particularly with our business, I think right now, it's funny when we started and we're telling people voice is important, you should be talking more to the customers, people are going, you're crazy. And like to some extent I kind of like those days when people thought we were crazy because there wasn't so much competition. Now it's hot, right? Everyone's going, oh, voice AI is like, we need to be in on this. And so now everyone is starting to talk about how voice is important. And now the advantage of that is that even though there's more competition, everybody is in market. So every big company that has big customer service, contact center type environments is thinking, how do I stop doing the rote things with humans and use AI for that and start having humans focus on more complicated interactions or other parts of the business where I do need higher order thinking.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I love about where we're at right now is seeing that the menial things, if you will, things that should be used automated, have AI involved, we may lose some jobs in those areas, but those are the things that also are probably the things that we don't want to spend as much time on, but they are very important. But now that frees us up, like you said, to have this time to be creative, innovative, strategic, the things that AI is not necessarily going to solve for us in our businesses. So talk through the client experience. Do you have a case study or two where, you're talking about how there's only a certain percentage that are using this technology for their business, and you see that growing to about 90% perhaps of handling these kind of calls? What were some of those first clients, and what's some of the impact that you've been able to make on their businesses to turn contact centers, call centers into revenue generators?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of different use cases. Some of the biggest ones obviously are replacing, interactions around support. Another big use case is replacing sort of the initial screening and initial qualification on sort of new leads, new sales type opportunities. And another big one is actually very operational type use cases, whether it's scheduling and rescheduling, payments and collections, that kind of thing. Across the board, I think, it's been very successful very quickly. What's a good example? One of our customers is a major insurance provider. And one of the challenges that they have is certain times of the year, everybody's trying to get insurance. And even though they scale up the human teams historically, there's still long wait times during that time of the year because they can't possibly scale up to the peaks cost efficiently. So they were not only doing this crazy thing where they had to hire and fire people every year, but they were also just annoying customers during that period, the most important period of the year. And so with AI agents now, we can replicate what that human agent does as well as humans, and it's at a fraction of the cost, so we're saving money. But more importantly, we can scale up and down variably, right? So on days or minutes where there's many more calls, then we have more AI agent capacity. On days where there's less, right? So there's no hold times, and then it completely changes the experience for customers. Not only are there no hold times, but the AI agents are trained like the best agents. So instead of having, half your team who's like literally never done this before and is trying to figure it out in the moment, these are AI agents that handle it much better than that. So I think the opportunity for companies that have seasonality or urgent needs for labor are really interesting. And in the contact center industry, I'd say every business goes through cycles where, their team leaves. Something like 40 or 50% of people leave every year in a contact center environment. So there are always opportunities where they're just short staff where instead you can use AI agents.
Yeah. And some of the work, you have the phone agents, which you've talked about. also chat, also SMS, so text messaging capabilities. So, how has that changed and evolved the way that people are able to create solutions for their customer base, perhaps, link them to another opportunity to cross sell them?
Yeah. So, from the beginning, we understood, I think, that the modern sort of way this would happen is that you would be reaching people, omni-channel. And so we were built from the start in that sense where you could do, email, text, calls, so on and so forth, video, which I think is not how tools were built historically. So even though today we are most focused on voice and we think voice is going to be the majority of the future, there's still times where you say, hey, I'm going to text you something, or hey, we weren't able to talk today, I'm going to send you this email, whatever. Like those are still valuable channels. So we do think about how do you make sure that for the customer, it's a cohesive experience, meaning the texts and the calls are coming from the same number. If they call back the number that texted them, it's the same as if they, text the number that called them. That's not how it works historically. Historically, you'd get calls from one number, texts from another, marketing from another, emails, and none of them are, anything you say to like marketing, contact center doesn't know. So we've tried to reduce all those problems into having Regal sort of be the central clearinghouse.
Nice. And from the time that you came up with this concept to launch, what was that like? And now we're, 2020 to today. I mean, many, many years. I'm sure that you've also evolved as a business.
Yeah. If I go back to when we started, my co-founder and I knew we wanted to start this business, but basically left the old one, took a little bit of time to get organized, and then really got started kind of in like September, October or 2020. And, we're live with our first customers by December or January. So we very quickly sort of went and did that. Other people, often will like spend a long time building a product before ever showing it to customers. And I think that's a mistake. That early product and the early customers, it was very basic, right? And we actually weren't able to do everything we wanted to do, but we focused on what are areas where we can add value, right? Where we can really do something, even if it's small, that is very valuable to the customer. And, if we find those, we believe we could then turn that into obviously a bigger business. And we eventually did.
Yeah, amazing. And you said, it was very basic. You've added other elements. Where do you see it going now?
Yeah, look, this transition from the main interface that people are engaging with being a website or an app or a social media to being actually, I think AI agents, like the conversational interface will be the main interface you engage with a brand, is going to be drastic and completely change how brands reach people. So today we're very focused on replacing some of these customer service interactions, but ultimately it won't just be customer service. Like everything, when you want an Airbnb, you're just going to say, I want an Airbnb in this place, and it'll engage with you and start going through it. So it's not to say that websites will go away or texting will go away. No, but just voice will be the primary mechanism because it's so much faster to talk than type. It's so much easier to emote and explain things. And it's going to be a great way for people to start interacting with brands. So, we're leaning into that future where that sort of conversational voice is going to become the primary interface.
Yeah. Well, and then let's take it a step further, right? We talked a little bit before we jumped on about when Web4, when we're fully engaged and everybody has their own personal agent who's helping manage their life, but also their business. And our agents are all talking to each other. Do you see, I mean, I look at the positives, but I know that there have to be negatives too, especially as this rolls out. And if there are hallucinations or if somebody gets the wrong information. So where do you see that playing, and where do you see that your organization and your thought leadership can have a role in helping people really understand the best use cases?
Yeah, I mean, start with there's actually very little difference between humans and AI when you talk about hallucinations. If I take a person off the street and I say, I'm going to put you on the phone, you can say any crazy shit you want, go. Like, well, guess what? They're going to say whatever crazy shit they want. Now, if I take a person and I train them for 3 weeks and say, you're only allowed to do this, and here's how how you answer these questions about mortgages, and here's how you do this, and you're not allowed to talk about those 4 things, well, they'll be like 97% accurate. And, after the fact, I'll catch the 3% when they're wrong. I'll have to go back to the customer and say, we were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
AI agents are not dissimilar, right? If I go in AI agent speak, turn the temperature really high, and don't give it the right knowledge bases, and don't have the prompt set up correctly, it can say crazy shit. On the other hand, if I have it with guardrails, with the right prompting, with the temperature much low, well, it's going to do really well, actually higher accuracy than humans. So I think this conversation about, AI agents having hallucinations is a bit of a red herring. there are specific cases that still are really complicated. So for instance, what's a good example? Let's say you have a knowledge base that you're plugging the AI agent into and there's a conflict. So one place in the knowledge base, it says you're allowed to give a refund. The other place says you're not allowed to give a refund. That's hard, right? So that's hard for a human too. And a human might know that, well, actually, I asked my neighbor and they told me which one it is, or the one that was written by the more senior person, or the one that was written more recently, or there'd be some other way for them to try to understand it. But AI is very bad by itself, or LLMs, I should say, are very bad by themselves at understanding conflicting information. So it's an example of something that we and other people in the industry need to work on, is creating this knowledge base or ontology, the way in which you understand and structure information and how to handle situations where there's conflicts in the information, whether it's sorting by date written or by seniority, or highlighting that to somebody more senior who can then fix the conflict.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I loved your example of the man on the street. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, again, it's that when people say that an AI agent hallucinates, that's I'm like, guys, yeah, if I just randomly put you on a phone, you would hallucinate too because you'd have no idea what to say.
Right, exactly. Where does call spam come into this? Because I know that we live in a world where we're getting a lot of text spam, we're getting a lot of call spam from companies that may or may not be legitimate, that are trying to sell us on some kind of service. So how does what you're doing help take out some of that?
Yeah, so from the beginning, we were not very happy with the tools that just like call people 10 times a day for, 10 days. Like, it doesn't help the brand, it doesn't help the consumer. So from the beginning, for instance, we worked with a carrier so that when our customers call, it shows the brand name on the call. Our tool is set up to have the calls happen at specific times based on actions you're taking rather than like randomly. We are trying to maximize the good calls that are leading a higher answer rate. So it's a very different model. There's another side to it beyond just like us sort of having a different model, which is, we agree with some of the regulation that's being put in place or being worked on, which is trying to basically close off people that don't have the right to call you and only allow calls from people that you've given your phone number intentionally to. So, the government actually, and sort of the carriers, are doing a very good job of this in some areas. So particularly around consumer calls. So like if somebody tries to randomly call consumers for something, like that gets shut down very quickly. The place where the government and the carriers are doing a terrible job is in alleged B2B calls. So there's technically not a law that regulates calls to a business. You're allowed to pretty much do anything. But the reality is that today, the business number is my cell phone number. And so what ends up happening is, as the head of a business, I get 100 calls a day from random people, and I never gave them my phone number. They don't have permission to call my phone number. They don't have permission to use an automated telephone dialing system or a predictive dialer to call my number. I don't have any control over that. And so the government needs desperately to close this loophole on the B2B side and make it the same as consumer side, which is if I go to their site and I give them permission to use my number, sure, they can call me. But short of that, they are not allowed to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, if there's a petition or anything that you start, I will be one of the first people to sign it and share it. Because I agree. Then the amount of calls that you get from businesses, same situation. I didn't sign up for anything. I don't even know who these people are who are calling me, leaving messages. I certainly didn't sign up for what they're trying to offer me. So yeah, it's a big issue. Now, what is the difference in the way that you might market additional services using these AI agents versus the outbound phone sales and phone calls?
How will we do differently, or what our customers do differently?
A little bit of both. What do customers do differently? How do you help them with those solutions?
Well, so two different topics. So on our side, when we're marketing to customers, one of the interesting things now is, it's much easier for them to start testing AI agents than to start using our software to change what their human agents are doing. So it lowers the barrier to entry and allows them to move more quickly, especially as we believe eventually there's going to be all handled by AI agents. And who cares what technology they're using for their human agents, because it's going to go away. On their side, as they're deciding between a human doing a call and AI, there's A/B testing, right? They're looking and saying, hey, what's the CSAT? What's the outcome? What's the average handle time? All these things. And look, where AI agents are performing as well, why wouldn't you use them? Because it's materially cheaper and much easier to operate. Are there cases where I don't think the AI agents perform as well? Sure, of course. Like there's, in complicated emotional sort of escalated calls like claims or like, serious situations, I probably would not use AI. Not never, but at least today I wouldn't use it. In calls with, a lot of speakers on the other end, the AI can still get tricked and trip up, so I wouldn't use it. In certain types of reasoning, we today don't allow the LLMs to do the reasoning. It's not that the AI agent can't do it, but we make sure it's not the LLM doing the reasoning. It's done either mathematically or there are certain models that are more sophisticated. So it's not the base LLM. So there are like caveats to all of it. But by and large, for the tier one interactions that exist, like we're doing fine.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you've raised over $80 million for your business. You were obviously early to market compared to a lot of the companies that I hear about using agentic AI and call service agents. So what was it like to be at the forefront? Did you find it made it easier to fundraise? And, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, start with everyone has a different fundraising strategy depending on sort of their goals and how they want to approach the market. So there are some players that just, went and raised as much money as they humanly could. And personally, that's not how I look at this. We are actually, I know it sounds like a lot of money, but relatively conservative in this space in terms of how much we raise. The second piece is we also, I think, are on a very different sort of, goal eventually. Our goal is not to go and just take as much money. Our goal is to return as much money as possible to our employees and investors ultimately. So you hear about this sometimes, but sometimes there are these big companies that you see in the press, and it turns out the employees own nothing of the company, and they didn't get anything out of the outcome. So our goal is to make sure that the equity the employees have becomes worth something. In order to do that, it changes your fundraising strategy and changes how you're going through all this. So I think the most important is just not to go out and look and say, oh, somebody else did that, I should just do it, but to think hard about what your goals are, what your fundraising strategy is, and execute against that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very human-centered approach. So I appreciate that. You are also an investor now. What kind of opportunities do you look for when you are trying to decide what you want to add to your investment portfolio?
I'd say mostly very early stage, let's say, and particularly we focus on the areas that we know well. So these days, a lot of tools around data and AI and things like that. Particularly, we focus more on the sort of what I call picks and shovels businesses within AI rather than the underlying technologies, because we don't particularly have any special knowledge of how to build an LM or how to build a voice. That's not our area of specialty. So stick to your knitting is usually the advice I give. And we invest relatively small amounts, right? So we're not going in leading rounds or anything like that. So we need to make sure that these are companies where there is a lead investor who is going to take a board seat and take a bigger role in it, because we're not going to play that bigger role.
Yeah. Again, a very human-centered approach. And what I find interesting about your approach is that you do hear about the big companies that raise as much money as they can and then they fail. And that money isn't going to the employees. It's not going back to the investors. We hear a lot about that side of things, right? And how fast there can be turnaround and churn in. Now everybody's hot on AI, but there are a lot of companies that don't succeed. And so making sure that you're invested in business with the right companies. And obviously you've had longevity. So you'd be a good bet, I would say. And knowing that you have a very human-centered approach and that you're not just looking at how much money can I cash grab, but you're looking at this as an investment into the future of not just yourselves, but your entire team is really something that is refreshing. It's something I don't think we hear a lot about. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think people need to know? Maybe they're not enterprise level. They are B2C. They want to dip their toe into this world, knowing that eventually they hope to be at that level.
Yeah. But the most important with this stuff is, document the processes you have. So a lot of small businesses, they took all the customer services calls, or hopefully now somebody else is, but nothing is written down. That's just a recipe for disaster. Even if you're not going to go to AI, what if that person leaves? What if they're hit by a bus, knock on wood? You have to have everything written down. So, what are all your system? Where is all the data? What are all the logins? What are your policies? How do you typically answer questions? What is your knowledge base? Write it down. If you haven't done it, do it tomorrow. Now, that's also the first step in starting to use AI, which is now that it's written down, you can give this information to AI to start doing things on your behalf, which could be answering a call or responding to an email or setting up a program. There's a lot of things you could do with it if it's written down. But if it's stuck in your head or the heads of the people on your team, it's not going to go anywhere. So start by writing everything down. I think the next step is, you have to decide if you're the one who's going to go learn these technologies or you're going to find somebody else in the company. But somebody needs to start learning these technologies. And, in larger enterprises, we obviously do this for our customers and really help them think through the strategy and think through where it should be used and how they're going to use our tools to build their own AI agents. In SMB, you're kind of on your own. Like, you're not going to get that kind of white glove onboarding. So, I would still start with, some basic stuff, which is, in your business, where are the different places AI could be applicable? So what about in engineering? What about in logistics? What about in customer service? What about in, so on and so forth, where it could either aid a human in what they're doing or perhaps do the job instead of a human. And then go and look for, maybe I always recommend 2 or 3 softwares at each of those places, force rank what you think is most important, start with that, and say, okay, I'm going to go test 3 softwares that aid humans in logistics, or I'm going to test 3 softwares that, do coding instead of, humans, and let's see what it is, and evaluate them and make yourself a little list of, what it does well and what it does badly. And I think you'll very quickly learn about the market. And if you are proactive in questioning the vendors, don't just take what they're saying at face value, but ask them, what do you do well? What do you do badly? Hey, there's this competitor. It feels like they do this well and this badly. Am I right? Very quickly, you'll actually be in a good place to understand the industry. Now, the hardest part is actually executing against this. I recommend finding people who were either computer science undergrads or people who have pretty technical backgrounds and getting them to help you with this, not because you need to be a software engineer, but because there are concepts underlying all this that are helpful to know. So yes, sure. Are there tools that you don't need a CS degree for? Yeah, of course. And you can use Regal. I don't have a CS degree and I use it just fine. But it's not bad to have somebody like that helping you, because there's always going to be pieces you don't understand.
Yeah. That's great advice for people who are listening, who may be in that space and need to start dipping their toes into the world of AI. I think a lot of times we look at the big shiny tool, right? And that's the only one we go to, instead of exploring, as you're saying, what else is out there and what will really be most effective for our own businesses. So what's next for you? You talked about how your customer base is going to expand, your customers themselves, how the percentage of use case is going to expand exponentially. Do you see other tools in the space that you see there's a hole in the market that might be, maybe you can't talk about them, maybe you can?
Look, the market is huge. There's $800 billion spent a year on the contact center labor alone, not even counting all the other calls that happen in the US. And, that'll mostly move to AI, not at the full price, right? It'll be a fraction of that. But even if it's a tenth the price, that's $80 billion to spend a year that'll move to this. So market is plenty large. So we talked about, we work largely in enterprise, where we're doing a lot more professional services and really helping the customer walk through this process to building their own AI agents. And then particularly we focus on services. So we do a little bit of retail, but even that, more complicated retail. And, in services, it's, insurance, financial services, healthcare, education, lending, collections, home services, that sort of more complicated world.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Alex, I always ask, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, words that continue to inspire you?
No favorite one. I mean, I will say, whatever, just showing up is 90% of success. I can't, repeat enough, it's execution that wins, not theorizing. So if you're out there thinking about some idea and you're not sure, if just start doing it. Even if it's not your full-time job, you want to go learn about AI agents, go to find some platform online and build an AI agent. Have it, try to convince your wife to buy pizza. I don't know. It can be something as simple as that, but you'll learn a ton, right? Or if you're very interested in a job in a different area, go just start doing it. Go, you want to be somebody who does more stuff with legal, then go look at contracts and start marking up what you think is right, what you think is wrong, and ask people's opinion of that. Somebody asked me the other day, how to become an investor. And I said, well, go invest. Yes, there's other stuff, but you can go to find a startup and invest, $500 or $1,000. You don't have to go invest $1 million. But what it teaches you is how to find the companies, how to understand what they want, how to get your way into the deal. And then over time, you'll see whether you were right or not, that was a good investment. And it can then be used as a track record of actually raising money to be a professional investor. So the point is, just go do the thing.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, that's amazing advice for everybody, including myself. So thank you, Alex Levin, for being on the show today. And We will have in the show notes, of course, Regal.ai for everybody to look at, to learn more about your services and if they're the right fit for them. So have a beautiful day. Thank you to everybody who's watching this episode or listening to it on your favorite platform. We haven't really had discussion about AI phone agents and the different technologies that exist that will make your life easier. So I appreciate you being the first to bring this to the podcast. And I'll be back again with another amazing guest to share a little bit about their stories, some tools that will be helpful for your business. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.